Deborah Hollis had slept in her mother's spare room for 8 years. 8 years. And on a Tuesday in October, she came back from the pharmacy with a white paper bag in her hand and found a steel lockbox clamped to the front door of the only home she had left. There was a man in the kitchen. A stranger. He was photographing the stove where her mother's oatmeal still sat warm in the pot. Deb did not raise her voice. She stood on the porch she swept every morning, and she watched a man she had never met take pictures of her life. The sign was already in the yard, red and white, staked into the grass she'd raked the night before. And when she asked the woman with the clipboard what was happening, the woman read her a text message out loud. Read it right there on the walk, like it was proof. It was from Deb's own brother. It said, "My sister's just the help. She doesn't need to sign anything." 2 of her siblings had decided. 1 buyer was already inside. 1 title officer was already at a desk across town moving papers. 4 people had looked at this house and agreed it was theirs to sell, and not one of them had asked the woman who lived in it. That night I found the folder my mother made me keep in the freezer. Behind the peas. She told me once, in a clear moment, "Keep it cold, Deb. Cold things don't burn." I'd never opened it. 8 years, and I never opened it. That night, I finally sat down at the kitchen table, and I read paragraph 3. If you've ever been treated as invisible by your own family, if you've ever given everything to people who counted it as nothing, this story is for you. Before I tell you the rest, do something for me. Subscribe so the algorithm carries this to the next person who needs to hear it. And comment the town you're watching from. Just the town. I want to see how far this one travels, because I promise you, there are more of us out here than anyone wants to admit. Now let me start at the beginning, because to understand what they did, you have to understand what I gave up, and you have to understand her. Her name was Eleanor. Everybody called her Nell. 8 years before that Tuesday, I was a hospice nurse in Columbus. I was good at it. I want you to know that first. I was 45 years old, and I had a life. I had a 1-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor with a window that caught the morning. I had a man named Robert who was 3 weeks from asking me a question I already knew the answer to. I had a job that meant something. When people were dying, I was the one who sat with them. I held hands that had stopped being able to squeeze back. I learned how to make the last part of a life gentle. That was my whole gift, and I was proud of it. Then my mother forgot how to turn off the tap. It started small. It always does. A pot left on the burner. A phone call where she asked me the same question 4 times. My brother Grant said she was just getting older. My sister Vanessa said she was fine. She'd seen her at Easter. She seemed fine. But I knew the shape of it. I had watched 100 families walk into this exact fog, and I knew what was coming for us. The doctor said the word in a small beige room in Harlan Ridge, Ohio. Early onset was already behind us. This was the middle of it, coming fast. Dementia. And then, he said the thing they always say. She's going to need someone. All the time. Soon I looked around that little room. Grant lived 2 hours away and ran a financial planning office. Vanessa lived in a house she couldn't afford with a husband who traveled. And me. I sat with the dying for a living. It wasn't even a decision. It was just arithmetic that only had one answer. I gave up the apartment. I gave up the job. I gave Robert back the future he was building, and I still remember his face when he understood I meant it. He didn't fight me. That was the worst part. He just got quiet and said, "You always were the one who showed up." And then he was gone, and I was standing in my mother's spare room in a town of 4,000 people, unpacking the last of my life into a dresser that smelled like cedar and somebody else's decades. 8 years. Let me tell you what 8 years of that looks like, because the people who sold this house never saw a single hour of it. There was a calendar on the kitchen wall. Not a pretty one. A big paper grid I filled in with a pen every single day. Her medications, morning and night, in my handwriting, because if I didn't write it down and cross it off, I couldn't trust my own exhausted memory. Donpezel at 8. The blood pressure pill at noon. The little white one that helped her sleep. Some nights. I did that 2,900 times. I did it when I had the flu. I did it on Christmas. There were the nights. Dementia doesn't respect the clock. She'd get up at 3 in the morning, sure it was time to make my father breakfast, and my father had been dead for 11 years. I'd hear her feet on the floorboards. I'd come out and find her in the dark kitchen, holding a frying pan, crying because she couldn't remember where the eggs were kept in her own house. And I would take her hand. I would say, "It's nighttime. Mama, Dad's resting. Let's you and me rest too." And I'd walk her back to bed the way you'd walk a child. Some nights it happened once. Some nights it happened 4 times. You learn to sleep in pieces. You learn to sleep with one ear open, like a mother of a newborn. Except the newborn is 80, and she used to sing you to sleep. And every single night, I left the porch light burning. That was mine. That was the thing I did that nobody asked me to. Because in the bad stretches, she would sometimes wake up and not know which house was hers. She'd stand at the window, frightened, looking out at a street she'd lived on for 50 years like it belonged to strangers. So I kept the porch light on. Every night, a little yellow bulb over the front door, and when she got scared, I'd bring her to the window, and I'd say, "See the light, Mama? That's our light. That's how you know you're home." And her whole body would loosen. Every time. That's how I know I'm home. I never asked for anything. That's the part I need you to understand before I tell you the rest, because it's my flaw and I know it now. I believed that doing right would be seen. I believed that if you gave your whole self to something, the people watching would honor it. I never asked to be on a deed. I never asked for $1. I thought the giving was enough, and I thought they were watching, and I thought they understood what it cost. I was wrong about almost all of that. But I was not wrong about one thing, and I didn't even know it yet. My mother had been watching. And my mother, in the middle of losing her mind, had done something quiet and permanent to protect me. I just hadn't read it yet. The first sign came in the spring. It was so small I almost missed it. I was scrolling through my phone one night after I'd gotten Nell down, and I noticed a group text I wasn't in. I only knew about it because Grant had forwarded me one message from it by accident, some logistics thing about a plumber, and at the top, I could see the name of the thread. It was called The Estate. Grant? Vanessa? Not me. They had a whole conversation running about our mother's house, our mother's money, our mother's things, and they had named it like she was already gone, and they had not put me in it. I told myself not to be small about it. I called Grant the next day. I kept my voice light. I said, "Hey, I saw there's a thread going about mom stuff. Want to add me?" And Grant did the thing Grant always does, where he makes you feel foolish for the very thing he's doing to you. He laughed, warm as anything. "Oh, Deb, we're not going to bother you with all the boring paperwork. You've got enough on your plate over there. Let us handle the grown-up stuff. You just take care of Mom. You just take care of Mom." Like that wasn't the whole entire thing. Like the boring paperwork wasn't a plan to remove the ground from under my feet. I said, "Okay." I said, "Thank you." I hung up, and something cold sat down in my stomach and didn't leave. And that night, I remembered something. It floated up out of nowhere, the way old days do. 3 years back. A good afternoon, one of Nell's clear ones, when she was almost herself. She'd come out to breakfast dressed, actually dressed, with her good shoes on, and she'd said, "Deb, drive me to Miss Vance's office. I need to get the paperwork right." Firm about it. Firmer than she'd been about anything in months. So I drove her downtown. There was no parking. I was double parked out front with my hazards on. And she said, "I'll only be a minute. This is between me and Priscilla." And she went in on her own 2 feet. And 20 minutes later, she came out looking satisfied. The way you look when you've finally done a thing you'd been meaning to do. I never asked what it was. I figured it was the will. I figured it was the boring paperwork. I was double parked. I never even read what she signed. I want you to hold on to that. Because I'd forgotten it for 3 years, and it was the most important thing that had ever happened to me. The next offense came in June, and this time there was a witness. I had a dialysis run with Nell, not her, a neighbor I helped drive, an old woman named Ruth who couldn't manage the trip alone, and I'd take Nell along because I couldn't leave her, and the two old women would hold hands in the back seat and talk about nothing. We were gone 3 hours, and while I was gone, a man came to the house. I know because my niece told me. Simone, Vanessa's girl, 17 years old, the only one of them with a soul that hadn't been sold yet. Simone was staying with a friend 2 streets over that summer, and she'd walked past the house and seen a strange car in the drive. So she'd let herself in the back, she had a key, she loved her grandmother, and she found a man in a golf shirt with a laser measure and a clipboard, walking Nell's bedroom, calling out numbers to himself, measuring the windows, measuring the closet, opening cabinets like he owned them. Simone texted me a photo, just the photo, and 3 words. Who is this? There he was in my mother's bedroom, a stranger's back, a yellow tape measure stretched across the foot of the bed where I tucked her in every night. I called Grant from the dialysis parking lot with my hands shaking. And Grant, again, so calm, so reasonable. It's just an appraisal, Deb, due diligence. You have to know what an asset's worth. It doesn't mean anything. An asset. My mother's bedroom was an asset. The room where she kept the photograph of my father in his Navy uniform, the room where I'd sat with her through the worst nights, was, to my brother, a number he needed a stranger to confirm. I didn't argue. I've learned that about myself. When the ground shifts, I go quiet and I go looking. That night, after Nell was asleep, I went to the freezer. I don't fully know why. It was that thing she'd said, surfacing again, the way the old day had surfaced. Keep the folder cold, Deb. Cold things don't burn. She'd said it years ago, out of nowhere pressing my hand against the freezer door. I'd thought it was the disease talking. I thought it was nonsense. I moved the peas. And there it was. A folder. A plain manila folder, stiff with cold, wrapped in a freezer bag, tucked behind 3 bags of frozen vegetables where no one would ever think to look. My mother, somewhere in the fog, had hidden something for me and made sure it would keep. I held it in my hands in the blue light of the open freezer. And I want to tell you I opened it right then. I didn't. I was afraid of it. I was afraid it was another kind of loss. A letter, a goodbye, some final lucid thing from her that would break me open on a Tuesday when I still had to get up at 3. I put it in the drawer by my bed. I told myself I'd read it when I was stronger. I had no idea I'd already run out of time. Because the next thing that happened was the Tuesday, the one I started with. It was the middle of the month. I'd left Nell for 40 minutes, just 40, with the neighbor lady watching her, to run to the pharmacy for the refill. I'd made her oatmeal before I left and set it on the back of the stove to stay warm, because that's what she liked when I came home, the 2 of us at the table with a warm bowl. 40 minutes. I came around the corner onto our street, and I saw the sign first. Red and white. In our yard. Then, the lockbox. A steel lockbox, the kind realtors clamp on a door, hanging off the handle of the front door I painted green myself 2 summers ago. Then, through the window, the man, moving through my mother's kitchen with a phone held up, taking photographs. Photographing the stove, photographing the oatmeal. There were people on the sidewalk, 2 of them. The Petersons from across the street who'd known my mother 40 years, standing there watching, not sure whether to wave or look away. And a woman on the porch with a clipboard and a lanyard, a realtor, waiting for me like I was the problem she'd been warned about. I parked. I got out with my little white pharmacy bag still in my hand, and I walked up my own front walk while my neighbors watched, and the realtor stepped in front of the door like she was protecting it from me. "Are you Deborah?" she said. not unkindly. "Careful, I'm going to need you to understand this is all authorized." "Authorized by who?" I said. "Quiet?" I was already very quiet. And she did the thing I will never forget as long as I live. She took out her phone, and she scrolled, and she read me a text message out loud, on my mother's porch, in front of the Petersons. She read it the way you read a permission slip. It says here, this is from Grant Hollis, the son. It says, "Go ahead and start the listing photos. My sister's just the help. She doesn't need to sign anything. She'll be moving out. My sister's just the help." I felt those words land somewhere very deep and very old. 8 years. The 3 a.m. walks. The calendar on the wall. The porch light. And to my brother, on paper to a stranger, I was the help. Not the daughter. Not the nurse who gave up everything. The help. And then, behind the realtor, the screen door opened. And my mother stood there, small in her cardigan, confused, blinking at all the people. She looked at the man with the phone. She looked at me. And she said, in a small, frightened voice, "Deb, why is that man taking pictures of my stove?" The whole street went still. The man lowered his phone. The Petersons looked at their feet. And I understood, standing there, that I could scream. I could scream, and it would be justified, and it would feel like the truest thing I'd ever done, and it would change nothing. So I didn't. I walked past the realtor. I took my mother's hand. I said, "Nobody's touching your stove, Mama. That's our oatmeal. Let's go inside." And I walked her in, and I closed the green door on all of them, and I set the kettle on, and my hands were perfectly steady. And that steadiness scared me more than shaking ever had. The man's name, I would learn later, was Dale. He wasn't the villain. But I didn't know that yet either. That day he was just a stranger with a phone, and I hated him with everything I had. You'd think that was the bottom. It wasn't. There was one more step down, and they took it at the kitchen table. 3 days later, Grant drove in, 2 hours, in his good car. And Vanessa came, in her good clothes. They sat down at my mother's kitchen table, the Formica one with the chrome edge, the one where I'd fed Nell 2,900 breakfasts, and they laid a piece of paper on it and slid it across to me. It was printed. It was official looking. Across the top it said, "Notice to vacate." 30 days. My brother had served me an eviction, at my mother's own table, with my mother sitting 10 feet away in her chair by the window, humming to herself, not understanding a word. Grant folded his hands. He used his client voice, the reasonable one, the one that's already decided you're being emotional. "Deb, this is just how it has to be done. Legally, it protects everybody. The house has to sell, Mom's care is going to cost more than we've got, and the smart move, the responsible move, is to liquidate now, before it all gets eaten up. You know I do this for a living. This is a dead asset just sitting here. We're doing the grown-up thing." And Vanessa, my golden little sister, who I used to braid hair for, Vanessa reached over and patted my hand. Patted it. And she said, "You knew this wasn't yours forever, Deb. You did. You made a choice to be here, and that was lovely of you, it really was. But you have to be gracious now. Don't make this ugly. Just be gracious. You made a choice, like it was a hobby, like I'd picked it up the way you pick up gardening. 8 years of my life reduced to a choice I should be gracious about surrendering. Something shifted in me at that table. It wasn't rage. I'd expected rage, and it didn't come. It was something colder and much more useful. It was resolve. I looked at the notice. I looked at my brother's folded hands and my sister's patting hand. And I stood up, and I went to the stove, and I poured my mother her tea, the way she liked it, milk first. I set it in front of her. She said, "Thank you, sweetheart." And for 1 second, she was completely clear, and she squeezed my wrist. Then I turned around, and I said the only thing I said to them that whole afternoon. I said, I'll read everything now." Grant asked what that meant. I didn't answer. I walked them to the door. I closed it, and I went into my room and I opened the drawer. The folder was cold from all those years in the freezer, cold in a way paper shouldn't be, and my hands finally shook as I unwrapped the freezer bag. Inside there were a few pages, and the top one had a raised seal, and a stamp in the corner from the county recorder's office, and a date 3 years back. The same week I'd sat double-parked outside Priscilla Vance's office with my hazards blinking reading a magazine, while my mother walked in on her good shoes to get the paperwork right. It was a deed, a quitclaim deed. My mother's shaky signature was at the bottom, and beside it, a notary's stamp, and beside that, the word recorded. I made myself read it slowly. The legalese swam. It said Eleanor Hollis conveyed the property to her 3 children. All 3. Equally, and for one horrible second I thought, that's it, that's all it is. She gave it to all of us, and I'm still the help. And then I got to paragraph 3. I read it once and didn't understand it. I read it again, and on the 3rd time, the whole room tilted, because I finally understood what my mother had done in that lawyer's office 3 years ago, alone, on purpose, while I sat outside thinking it was nothing. She had given my brother and sister the house, but she had reserved something first. Right there, in the careful language of a woman who was losing her mind and knew it, and moved fast before she couldn't, right there it said she was reserving unto my daughter Deborah a life estate in the property for the term of her natural life. I didn't know what those words meant, not fully, not yet, but I knew my mother's mind. I knew she had walked into that office because she saw this coming. She saw them coming 3 years before they came, through the fog of a disease that was taking everything else, and she had reached out one clear hand, and she had built me a wall. I sat on the edge of my bed with a frozen deed in my lap, and the porch light burning outside the window, and for the first time in 8 years. I picked up the phone to call a lawyer of my own. The line rang twice. A calm voice answered. "Priscilla Vance." "Ms. Vance," I said, and my voice barely worked. "My name is Deborah Hollis. I think 3 years ago you did some paperwork for my mother Eleanor. I'm sitting here holding it, and I need you to tell me exactly what my mother did. Because I don't think my brother knows this exists." There was a pause on the line, a pause that felt like it had been waiting 3 years to happen. And then Priscilla Vance said, very gently, "Deborah, I've been wondering when you'd call. Sit down, and let me read you paragraph 3 the way your mother meant it. Because your brother is about to make a very expensive mistake, and your mother knew he would." She talked for 20 minutes. I didn't interrupt once. Priscilla Vance had a way of speaking that reminded me of the doctors I used to work alongside. The good ones. The ones who understood that information delivered without kindness was just another wound. She walked me through the language carefully, the same way I used to walk families through a diagnosis they weren't ready to hear. She explained what a quitclaim deed was. She explained what a remainder interest meant. She explained, in plain words, that my mother had signed over her ownership of the house to all 3 of her children equally, but that before she signed anything, she had reserved something for herself, and then, in the same instrument, had named me as the person who would hold that reservation after she could no longer hold it herself. A life estate, Priscilla said, means exactly what it sounds like. The person holding it has the legal right to live in the property and to use it for the duration of their natural life. Nobody can remove them. Not a landlord, not a sibling, not a title company, not a 30-day notice typed up on a kitchen table and slid across the formica like a verdict. The holder of a life estate does not need permission to be there. They do not need to ask. The house belongs to them, functionally and legally until they die, and only then does the remainder interest held by anyone else become worth anything at all. I asked her what that meant for Grant's sale. She was quiet for a moment. Not because she was choosing her words, because she was giving me a second to catch up before she said them. "It means," she said, "that they can sell their remainder interest. They can sign papers and accept money and shake hands and believe they've done something. But a buyer purchasing a remainder in a property that carries a recorded life estate is purchasing something that produces nothing. No rental income, no occupancy, no possession, not while the life estate holder is living. Any title company worth its license would have caught that the moment they ran the chain of title. The instrument was recorded. It was in the county records. Anyone who pulled a full search would have seen it inside of 10 minutes. I thought about that for a moment. Then I asked her how she could be certain my mother had understood what she was doing. Priscilla Vance told me she had required a capacity assessment before the signing, that she had insisted on it, not because anyone asked, but because she had practiced elder law for 22 years, and she knew what a family in motion looked like, and she had not been willing to let Eleanor Hollis's signature become ammunition in someone else's hands. She told me Nell had come in on a Tuesday morning, answered every question clearly and without help, had described her children by name and temperament, and had stated, without being prompted, that she was reserving the life estate for Deborah because Deborah was the one who had stayed. She had said, and Priscilla read this to me from her own notes, her voice even and deliberate. She had said, "My other two children are good people. But Deborah is the one who sleeps in my house and checks if I'm breathing. I want her to know she'll never have to leave it." I put my hand over my mouth. Priscilla let me have a moment with that. She was good at knowing when to stop talking. When I could speak again, I asked her what I should do. And she said something I hadn't expected. She said, "That's actually entirely up to you." She said I could call Grant tonight. I could stop the sale before it went any further, before money changed hands, before earnest funds were deposited. I could send a letter, file a notice, make phone calls. There were several clean and direct ways to end this quickly. Those were all options. Or, she said, her voice the same steady temperature it had been the whole call, I could let them close. I didn't say anything for a second. I wasn't sure I'd heard her right. She explained it calmly. The deed was already recorded. That didn't change whether I did anything about it tonight or next week, or on the day they sat down at the title company's table. The truth of what my mother had done was already in the county records, sitting there, waiting. If the title company had done its job, they would have found it. They hadn't. That was their failure, not mine. And it would become very much their problem on the day the closing was supposed to happen, and a buyer's attorney finally ran a proper search. Because any competent attorney representing a buyer putting real money into this transaction would pull the full chain of title before wiring funds. That was standard practice. That was the moment this would detonate, with or without me. I asked her, very quietly, if that was what she thought I should do. Let them sit down and sign and think they'd won, and let the truth find them at the closing table the way they'd refuse to let it find me at my own front door. Priscilla Vance said she was an attorney, not a moral philosopher, and that she wouldn't tell me what to do. But she said she could have a certified copy of the recorded deed in my hands by Thursday morning. And she said that, if I wanted her to be available on the 19th, the date I told her Grant had mentioned, she could arrange her calendar. I thanked her. I told her Thursday was fine. I told her I would think about the 19th. Then I hung up and sat in the dark for a long time. Outside, the porch light was burning. From down the hall, I could hear the small, familiar sounds of my mother settling into sleep. The particular creak of the mattress I knew so well I could have named it. The soft exhale that meant she was comfortable and safe, and where she'd always belonged. I listened to those sounds, and I thought about my brother's face at that kitchen table. The way he'd slid the paper toward me like it was already done. The way Vanessa had smiled at a spot on the wall slightly above my head. The way she always had. The specific geometry of dismissal that said, "You are furniture we are choosing not to move around." I thought about 8 years. I thought about the Columbus apartment I'd given up, the boxes I'd loaded into a rental van on a gray October morning, the nursing shifts I'd said goodbye to, the man I'd been seeing who didn't want to wait, and I couldn't ask him to. I thought about medication calendars and 3 a.m. wandering, And the way Nell used to grab my hand in the early mornings and hold it without saying anything because she knew, in whatever was left of her knowing, that I was the one who had not let go. I opened the folder again and read paragraph 3 one more time. Then I made a decision. I would not call Grant. I would not send a letter. I would not warn anyone about anything. I would order the certified copy. I would let Priscilla Vance hold her calendar date, and I would go to the family meeting next week, and I would ask my brother, with genuine curiosity, what the closing date was. I would carry boxes from my room to the hallway so they would see them and feel settled. I would be exactly what they had always seen when they looked at me. Quiet, compliant, no trouble at all. Priscilla Vance called me back on a Thursday morning to say the certified copy was ready. I drove to Harlan Ridge to pick it up myself. I did not want it in the mail. I did not want it sitting in a metal box at the end of the driveway where anyone could reach in. I had learned something about my family that spring. They would reach into anything. Her office was small. 2 chairs, a lamp, a shelf of pale green books. She slid the copy across the desk in a stiff folder, and I saw the raised seal again. The county recorder's mark pressed into the paper like a thumbprint. Real recorded mine to hold. You understand what you're choosing, she said. You could send Grant a letter today. This would be over by Friday. I know. Some people need the fight. It's how they feel like it mattered. I thought about that. I thought about my brother's hands folded on my mother's table. I don't need the fight, I said. I need them to be sitting down when they find out. She looked at me for a long moment. 22 years of watching families do this to each other were in that look. Then she nodded once and told me to call her the minute anything moved. I drove home and made my mother's dinner. That was the thing nobody understood about those weeks. Life kept happening. The betrayal did not pause the oatmeal or the pills or the porch light. Nell still needed her tea at 4. She still woke at 3 sometimes and stood in the hall in her nightgown, looking for a door that made sense to her. I still walked her back. I still held her hand until her breathing went soft and even. The house was being sold out from under us, and I was still buttering her toast the way she liked it, corner to corner, no crust left dry. So I decided to let them see exactly what they expected to see. I carried boxes. That was the first thing. I took empty liquor store boxes from behind the market, and I stacked them in my room, and I filled a few with books and winter sweaters, the things I would not need before the 19th. I set them by the door. When Vanessa came by to check on Mom, which meant check on the house, she saw the boxes and her whole face relaxed. I watched it happen. The tension left her shoulders. I had become manageable again. I had become furniture that was agreeing to move itself. I'm glad you're being smart about this, she said. I'm trying, I said. There was a family meeting the second week. Grant drove the 2 hours from the city and sat at the kitchen table like a man chairing a board. He had a folder too. His was full of numbers. Sale price, agent's cut, the split 3 ways. I want to keep this clean, he said. No hard feelings. We're all getting a piece of this. When does it all happen? I asked. I made my voice small and practical, the voice of someone worrying about logistics. I need to know how much time I have with the boxes. Closing's the 19th, he said. Should all be wrapped up by lunch. The 19th. He said it the way you'd say a grocery list. He had no idea he was handing me the one date I needed. I nodded and wrote it on the medication calendar on the wall, in the little square, like it was an appointment. He watched me write it, and he thought I was surrendering. I was setting a clock. Simone came with them that day. She sat on the arm of the couch with her knees up, 17 and quiet, watching the adults the way smart kids do. When Grant and Vanessa went out to the porch to argue about the agent's fee, she came into the kitchen where I was rinsing cups. Are you okay? She asked. I'm fine, honey. You're not, though, she lowered her voice. I saw the man measuring Grandma's room. I took a picture. I didn't know if I should send it. You did the right thing. She chewed her lip. I almost told my mom about the folder. The one in the freezer. I saw you take it out. I didn't say anything, but I almost did, because it felt wrong to keep it. And then it felt wrong to tell. And Simone, I dried my hands and turned to her. I need you to do something hard. I need you to keep almost telling and never quite telling. Just for a little while. Can you do that for me? She looked at me. She was old enough to know something was underneath the question. Is Grandma going to be okay? Your grandmother, I said, is the smartest woman any of us ever met. Even now. Especially now. She nodded slowly, and she kept my secret, that 17-year-old girl, better than either of her elders ever kept a promise. The days went by. The siblings got smug. I could feel it building in them the way you feel weather. Grant stopped bothering to be polite on the phone. Vanessa started talking about the money as if it were already in her account, mentioning a contractor, mentioning a trip. The remainder of my mother's life had a price, and they had already spent it in their heads. I let them. But there was one thing I would not do quietly, and it had nothing to do with them. His name was Dale Okafor. The buyer. I had his card. The realtor had left a stack on the counter during the lockbox day. Crestline Home Partners, a little logo of a house with a sunrise behind it. I'd thrown most of them away. I kept one. I sat with it for 3 days before I called. Because here was the truth I had to sit with. If I said nothing, the deed would still surface. Any honest title search would find it. The sale would still collapse. I did not need to warn Dale Okafor to win. But he had not done anything to me. He was a stranger who wanted to fix up an old house and sell it. He had trusted the people who were supposed to check the paperwork. And if I stayed silent to make my ambush cleaner, I would be doing to him a smaller version of what my family had done to me. I would be letting a person walk into a room and get hurt by something I could have named. I would not become that to win. So, I called him. Mr. Okafor, my name is Deborah Hollis. I'm the woman who was making oatmeal the day you photographed the kitchen on Cedar Lane. There was a silence on the line. Miss Hollis, yes, I'm sorry about that day. I was told the house was vacant. Nobody said, I know. I'm not calling to be angry. I'm calling to tell you something before you wire your money. I heard him sit up. You can hear that over a phone. A man moving from politeness to attention. Before you close on the 19th, I said, I want you to do one thing. Pull a full title search. Not the fast one the title company ran. A full one. And when it comes back, read paragraph 3 of the deed my mother recorded 3 years ago. What's in paragraph 3? The reason your house isn't vacant, I said, and won't be for a long time. He was quiet again. Then, carefully, are you telling me there's a problem with the title? I'm telling you to read it yourself, so you believe it. Don't take it from me. Take it from the county recorder. Anchor County has it on file. It's been there for 3 years. Somebody just never looked. I could hear him breathing. A careful man doing math. Why are you telling me this? He said finally. If there's a defect, you could just let me get burned. Because you didn't do anything to me, Mr. Okafor, I said. My family did. And I don't do to strangers what was done to me. Read paragraph 3. That's all I'm asking. I hung up. And Dale Okafor, honest small flipper that he was, did exactly what I asked. He called Anchor County Title that same afternoon and told them he would not wire $1 until a full independent search cleared. And his own attorney, a woman he'd used on 2 other flips, ordered the certified record. She was reading it 3 days before my brother ever knew there was something to read. That was the shape of it. On one side of the county, my siblings signing their futures to a house they didn't understand. On the other side, a stranger's lawyer with her glasses pushed up, tracing a line of legal Latin with the tip of her pen, going still. The 19th came on a cold, bright Tuesday morning. I had asked Ruth next door to sit with Nell. Ruth is 80, and I drive her to dialysis 3 times a week, and she loves my mother. And she said, of course, Go do what you need to do. I made Nell's breakfast, and I kissed the top of her head, and I told her I'd be back before her program came on. She patted my hand. On the calendar, in the little square marked 19, I had drawn a small star. Then I drove to the title company with Priscilla Vance's certified copy in a folder on the passenger seat, riding shotgun like a person. Anchor County Title had a conference room with a long table and too many chairs and a plate of pastries nobody was eating. I did not go in right away. Vance had told me to wait until she texted. She wanted them seated. She wanted pens uncapped. There is a strategy to arriving, she'd said, and the strategy is to arrive after they think it's done. So I sat in my car in the lot, and I watched them go in. Grant in a gray suit I'd never seen, carrying a leather folder. Vanessa in heels, on her phone, laughing at something. They walked past my car and did not see me. Why would they? I was just the help. I did not need to sign anything. Dale Okafor arrived alone, and he did not look like a man about to buy a house. He looked like a man walking into a hospital. He had his attorney with him, a small woman in a navy coat carrying a thick file, and the two of them went in with their shoulders set. My phone buzzed. Vance. They're seated. Come now. I'm 1 minute behind you. I walked in. The conference room went quiet in stages. Vanessa saw me first, and her laugh died in her throat. Grant looked up from his folder, and his face did a complicated thing. Surprise, then irritation, then a kind of managerial patience, the look of a man about to explain to a child why she can't come to the meeting. Deb, he said, this is the closing. You don't need to be here for this. I know, I said. I just wanted to see it happen. There's really nothing for you to actually, said Dale Okafor's attorney. Before anyone signs anything, I need to stop the table. The title officer at the head of the room, a heavy man named Coyle with reading glasses and a stack of documents, looked up sharply. We've cleared title. We're ready to execute. You haven't cleared anything, the navy-coated attorney said. She opened her file. She did not raise her voice either. She had the same quiet I did, and I understood then that quiet is what the truth sounds like when it's sure of itself. My client ordered an independent full chain search this week, because the search this company provided was completed in under 2 hours, and I don't trust anything about a house that gets read in less time than a movie. Coyle's face began to change color. There is a recorded instrument on this property, she went on, sliding a copy down the table, dated 3 years ago, indexed in Anchor County, book and page right here. A quitclaim deed executed by Eleanor Hollis, and it does not convey what your sellers think it conveys. Grant reached for the paper. That's Mom's deed. She left the house to the three of us equally. We've been through this. Read paragraph 3, the attorney said. And there it was. The line I had read in my kitchen at midnight with my coat still on, coming out of a stranger's mouth in a room full of the people who tried to bury it. Reserving unto my daughter Deborah, the attorney read, a life estate in the property for the term of her natural life. The room did not understand yet. I watched it not understand. Vanessa's brow was pinched, waiting for someone to tell her it was fine. What does that mean? Grant said. It wasn't a question. It was a demand for it to mean nothing. Coyle, the title officer, had gone gray. He knew. He'd known the second he saw the seal. It means, he said slowly, that your mother reserved the right to occupy this property to a life tenant. And she named your sister. So? Vanessa said. It's her name on some old paper. We're all still selling. You can sell your remainder, the attorney said. That's all you own. The remainder. Which means Mr. Okafor would be buying a house he cannot enter, cannot renovate, cannot rent, and cannot occupy for as long as your sister lives. Which, given that she's 53 and healthy, is not an investment. It's a lottery ticket that pays out at a funeral. She closed her file. My client is not buying that. The purchase is dead. We want the earnest money returned today. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. That was when Priscilla Vance walked in. She came in without hurry, a woman who had done this 100 times, and she set her briefcase on the table, and she looked around the room like a teacher taking attendance. "I'm Priscilla Vance," she said. "I drafted that deed. And I recorded it." And before anyone in this room starts shouting the word manipulation, she looked directly at Grant, who had opened his mouth to do exactly that. "I'll save you the trouble." She took a slim tablet from her bag and set it upright on the table, facing them. "On the day Eleanor Hollis signed this instrument, I recorded a capacity examination, standard practice in my office for any elderly client executing a conveyance. Date, day of the week, her children's names, the value of her home, the nature of what she was doing, and why. 22 years of practice have taught me that families like to discover conscience at the closing table." She pressed the screen. "So here she is. Judge for yourselves." And my mother's voice filled the room. Not the voice she has now. The voice she had 3 years ago, on a good afternoon clear as a bell. I had forgotten it could sound like that. I stood very still. "My name is Eleanor Hollis. It's a Tuesday. My children are Grant, Vanessa, and Deborah." A pause. The little laugh she used to have. "I know exactly what I'm signing, young man. You can stop looking at me like I'm made of glass. I'm giving the house to all 3 of them when I'm gone. But Deborah stays. Deborah gave up her whole life to sit with me while I lose mine. The other 2 send cards." Another pause. "If they ever try to put her out of this house, you show them this. You tell them their mother had all her marbles the day she made sure the one who stayed would always have a door. That's all. Turn it off." The screen went dark. Nobody moved. Vanessa had a hand over her mouth. Grant was staring at the black tablet as if he could argue with it. "Her capacity is documented," Vance said quietly. "Contemporaneously, by video. Any challenge to this deed will fail. And it will fail expensively. And I will make sure the court knows you were shown this recording and chose to litigate against your own mother's clearly stated wishes anyway." She picked up her briefcase. "I don't recommend it." Grant stood up. His chair scraped. He turned to me, and for the first time in 8 years my brother looked at me directly, not at a spot above my head, not through me, at me. And what was in his face was not shame. It was calculation curdling into rage, because it had nowhere to go. "You did this," he said. "You got her alone, and you—" "I was double parked, Grant," I said. "You want to know where I was the day Mom signed that? I was sitting in the car outside this woman's office, because Mom asked me to drive her, and wouldn't tell me why. I never read what she signed. I found out 3 weeks ago, same as you're finding out now. The only difference is, I looked in the freezer, and you looked at a bank statement." "The freezer," Vanessa started. "She told me to keep the folder cold," I said. "Cold things don't burn." She said that to me on a good day, years ago, and I thought it was the disease talking. It wasn't. She was smarter than all of us, right up until she couldn't be. And she used what she had left to protect the child none of you thought was worth a phone call." Grant was breathing hard. "I was protecting the family's money. Do you understand what Medicaid recovery does to an estate? I was trying to get this asset out before the state took half. I was protecting all of us." I looked at him. 8 years of 3 a.m. wanderings and buttered toast, and a porch light I left burning every single night so my mother would know which house was home. 8 years of him 2 hours away, sending cards. "You weren't protecting the family's money, Grant," I said. "You were protecting yourself from ever having to say thank you. Because if you'd said thank you even once, you'd have had to admit that what I did had value. And if it had value, then maybe I was owed something. And you couldn't stand to owe me. So you decided I was the help. It was cheaper." He had no answer. A man who priced everything, and I had handed him a bill he couldn't argue down. Vanessa was crying now, the ugly kind, mascara going. But even her tears were about her. "You don't understand," she said. "I needed my third. I have a mortgage I can't. The payments, Deb. I did the math. I already promised people." She caught herself hissing and made it a whisper. You'd really do this to us? Your own family? I almost laughed, not cruelly. It just came up in me, this old exhausted thing. I didn't do anything, Vanessa, I said. I didn't forge a document. I didn't manipulate a sick old woman. I didn't sneak a lockbox onto anybody's door or read a man's private text out loud in a front yard to prove I had the right to sell his home. I let that land. I read what Mom wrote. That's all. She wrote it. 3 years ago. In her own clear mind, you should have read it too. It was in the freezer the whole time, behind the peas, in the house you were so sure was yours to sell. You just never went looking, because it never once occurred to you that she might have been thinking about me. Vanessa had nothing. She sat down hard. Coyle, the title officer, cleared his throat into the wreckage. He looked like a man watching his career walk out a window. The sale cannot proceed. The title is not marketable. Mr. Okafor's earnest money will be returned in full today, and Anchor County will be reviewing how this instrument was missed in our... He stopped. There was no good end to that sentence. 20 minutes. That's how long their search had taken. 20 minutes to certify 8 years of my life didn't exist. Dale Okafor spoke for the first time. He'd been quiet in the corner through all of it, this stranger watching a family come apart. Now he stood, and he came around the table, and he put out his hand to me. Ms. Hollis, he said, thank you for the phone call. You didn't owe me that. You didn't owe me anything either, I said, and shook it. I want to say something, in front of everybody. So it's said. He looked at Grant and Vanessa, then back at me. You called a man you'd never met to keep him from getting cheated, when staying quiet would have served you better. I've been in this business 11 years. I don't meet a lot of people who do that. He nodded, once, like a man setting something down. If you ever want to talk, down the road, about doing this right, a real agreement, one that honors what your mother set up, you know where to find me. But that's for another day. And it was, in fact, for another day. But I'll tell you now how it ended. Because it's part of the reckoning. Months later, when the dust had settled, and the family lawyers had exhausted themselves, Dale Okafor came back. Not with a lockbox. With a contract drawn up by his Navy-coded attorney and blessed by Priscilla Vance. He bought the siblings' remainder for what it was actually worth, which was far less than they dreamed. A discounted stake in a house he could not touch while I lived. And in the same document, in plain language anyone could read, he acknowledged my life estate and agreed in writing to honor it for the term of my natural life. Grant and Vanessa took the check because a small real check beats a large imaginary one. And the one man in the whole affair who'd behaved with any decency was the one who ended up with a fair deal and a clear conscience. The cruel fell. The decent was rewarded. In the same arc. My mother would have liked that. She always did believe the ledger balanced eventually, if you lived long enough to see it. There was one more moment at that title company, and it's the one I keep. As everyone was gathering coats, and Grant was muttering to his lawyer on the phone, and Vanessa was fixing her face in a compact mirror. Simone slipped in the door. She'd ridden along with her mother and waited in the lobby, and now she stood at the edge of the room taking it all in. Her mother's ruined mascara, her uncle's rage, and me, standing quiet by the window with a folder under my arm. She came to me. She didn't say anything about the deed. She just looked up at me. That 17-year-old with her grandmother's steady eyes. I'm going to nursing school, she said. I decided. I wasn't going to. Everybody said there's no money in it, but I decided. Your grandmother was a nurse's kind of person, I said. She'd be proud. I don't want to be like my mom, Simone said, very low, so only I could hear. I want to be like you. And Vanessa, across the room, heard just enough of it to go still. Her own daughter, choosing the sister she'd called the help. That was its own quiet verdict, and it landed harder than anything I could have said. 6 months later, it is a Thursday morning in a good spring, and the porch light is on. I leave it burning every night still. Force of habit. My mother knows which house is home now, the way she's always known it, in her body more than her mind, and when she comes down the hall in the early gray, she doesn't look lost anymore. She looks like a woman walking through rooms she's known for 50 years. Because she is. There's oatmeal on the stove. Corner to corner, toast. She's in her own chair, by the window, the one that looks out on the yard where a red and white sign used to stand and doesn't anymore. This morning was a good one. She looked at me over her tea, and she said, "Deborah, just my name. Plain." And I said, "Right here, Mom." And that was the whole conversation, and it was everything. The folder is back in the freezer, behind 3 bags of frozen peas, wrapped in its plastic, cold, where cold things don't burn. I put it back myself, in case anyone ever forgets again. I don't think they will. But my mother taught me you don't leave the door unlocked, just because the last thief left. Grant sent a card at Christmas. It's on the counter, unopened. I know what's in it without reading it. A careful non-apology. A paragraph that says a lot about family and nothing about what he did. Signed with his name, and his wife's, and the kids'. I'll open it someday. Maybe. It costs me nothing to leave it closed. And it costs him something to know it's sitting there. And after 8 years, I've made my peace with a small ledger of my own. Vanessa didn't send anything. That's honest, at least. She's still in the house she can't afford. Still doing math that doesn't work. Still telling whoever will listen that her sister stole the family home. Simone starts her clinicals in the fall. She calls me on Sundays. Here's the only thing I understand now that I didn't before, and then I'll let you go. The people who count your sacrifice as free, who watch you give up the job and the apartment and the man and the years, and decide in their hearts that it was your choice, so it's owed nothing. Those are the exact people most shocked to learn it was never theirs to spend. They thought my 8 years were a gift to them. They were a gift to her. And she, God love her, made sure I'd never have to knock at my own door to collect on it. That's the part I can't get all the way past. Not the lockbox. Not the sign. Not even the notice slid across her table like I was already gone. It's that my mother, losing everything, thought of me. And my brother and sister, losing nothing, never once did. I turn off the kitchen light at night now, and I leave the porch one burning, the way I always have. And I stand there a second in the dark hallway, listening to her breathe down the hall, safe, home, where she belongs. She made sure I'd never have to knock at my own door. I just wish they'd loved her enough to read why. If you've watched this far, tell me the town you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels.